Hi, this is Ann with Fiber Designs by Ann, and today I'm going to show you what I'm doing with the painted fabric that I made. So usually, when I'm putting a sleeve on a quilt, if the back is black, I'll make my sleeve black. But I decided, since I wanted to paint some fabric for the fun of it, and because showing you how I make a sleeve and put it on the quilt will be easier to see in this fabric, I'm going to show you how I put a sleeve on a quilt, how I make a sleeve, and how I attach it to the quilt. And I'm also going to show you the rod, the stick that I make and use to hang my quilts. I have a video I'll link to that shows how I hang a quilt, and in that video I use one of my hanging sticks. Here's a little quilt, my Thank You First Responders quilt. That's why I have a little mask, being the vessel for the flowers in this quilt. That was really fun to make. But I'm showing it so that you can see the sleeve. This one's a little camouflage because it matches the back fabric. And the sticks that I use. And I've hung quilts that are a little over 60 inches or closer to 65, 70 inches with the same technique. I'm going to show you on a small sample because a long one would be impossible to show you. So I just have what is called doorstop. And I buy it at the lumber yard. It comes in several foot lengths. Sometimes it's pieced together like this. It's just pine. And sometimes it is smooth and not pieced together. I think this costs a little more. Something you want to do when you're purchasing it is lay it on the floor like this and sight down it, because sometimes it's very bowed and you want it to be as straight as possible. This has a little curved edge, which doesn't really matter. I do tend to put a certain way in my sleeve, but it's not important. It can just be straight. So I'm going to show you how to measure for the stick and for the sleeve. I use a clear ruler, but that's optional. The doorstop molding or trim. I use a tack hammer, but any hammer would be okay. These are screw eyelets, number 216, and a tiny tack nail, a permanent marker. I like to use black. I use a scratch awl, but you can use a screwdriver. It needs to fit through the eyes of the eyelet, and a retractable tape measure, any kind of tape measure. You want to make sure that when you turn your quilt over to measure, that you have the correct side up so that you're putting the sleeve on the top. You can put a sleeve on the bottom as well. If it's a big quilt and it's not really flat and you want it to hang flat, you can put a sleeve on the bottom as well, but I just do the top. And I'm going to measure just about an 1/8 inch in from the inside of the binding on both sides. So this is right at 19, so that's nice and convenient. So when I cut my doorstop, my stick, that's exactly what I'm going to cut it, so that I know that it'll fall just in between here. That's leaving room for my eyelet screws to come out and my sleeve to cover at least the wood and not show on the front. I use a power saw to cut this. I'm not going to show you that part. So once you have your stick, I'm going to show you on this small piece so that you can see it. And you can notice a difference here in the bands. Sometimes the thick ones are really hard And that's one reason I like this pure stuff that isn't pieced together. It's a little easier to get the nail through. But I'm going to show you on this that happens to have those. If you can dodge those, it's better because the wood won't be as hard. It'll be softer there. And what I do is I look at the end. Now this is my piece that's cut exactly the way I want it for the top of my quilt, which I'm going to move because I have a marker out here. And you can lay a ruler on here I go 1/4 inch down and in the center of that. Like I said, you can just eyeball it, but 1/4 inch from the top, and I'm on the rounded top if you have one that's rounded, 1/4 inch down and in the center. So if this was a longer piece, I'd be holding it with my knees or something so that it would stay in place, but I'm going to just sort of guesstimate that. And I'm going to hold my marker there for a second so it leaves that little tiny dot. I'm going to take my little nail and I'm going to hold it over that. If I'm doing this on a long stick, I'm got it resting on the floor. Sometimes I have to stand on a stool to do that. I have a tack hammer, and I'm just gonna hammer that down. And I can see that I'm actually a little bit higher than 1/4 inch. That's okay, as long as whatever measurement I do here, I want to try and match on the other end. And what I'm doing, besides hammering crooked, is just making a starter hole. Don't want it to be big, don't want it to be too far in. It's just a starter hole. Oh, and let me grab something else. You can use a screwdriver sometimes, but I like my little stiletto thing here. And I'm going to put my eyelet in. The reason you go down to 1/4 inch is because that's about where this would be hidden. And if it's too hard and it's not screwing in, it's probably because I didn't do enough of a starter hole. So I'm going to do that again, or do it a little more. I'm being a little shy with it. And just wiggle it out. And then, if that's difficult for your hands, you can just put a screwdriver, or I'm using, like I said, my sort of stiletto scratch-all thing. And you want it to just be straight in there and down as far as it can go. So now I'm going to do the exact same thing to the opposite end. Something I want to mention, be sure your nail looks straight when you're hammering it this direction and this direction. And then when you're screwing your screw in, same thing. Try and keep it as straight as you can. Still want it to go in as straight as you can. So I've attached the ends to my hanging stick. Okay, we're going to take a look at this one piece with the sleeve already on it. And I have my stick and I have the rounded part up against the face. Like I said, it doesn't matter if it's rounded or not. There's a lot of layers in front of that, so it doesn't matter. And because I measured my stick properly, once the eyelets are in it, they are still hidden behind the binding. And that's what you want to have happen. So when the piece is hung, nothing shows in the front. So it's a really nice way to hang a small art quilt, especially. That way your stick is touching the sleeve and the sleeve is touching the wall. So I know that top of my quilt, my stick measured 19. I have my eyelets done on my stick here. And you can see that they'll just be hidden nicely. So I want my finished sleeve to just come to that edge. So I have extra fabric here. So I'm going to cut this strip. Unless this is for a show and they have a certain requirement for the sleeve, I just make mine to fit my own hanging stick. So I'm going to cut my strip of fabric 5 3/4 of an inch wide. And because I know my stick is 19 inches, I'm going to add an inch to that, because I'm going to turn under approximately 1/4 inch twice, which will be 1/2 of an inch on each side. So I'm going to cut this 20 inches. So I hope that made sense. My stick is 19, I'm going to add an inch. I'm going to cut my 5 3/4 by 20 inch strip. So I'll do that now. My piece isn't straight this way. I'm going to fix that when I trim it to 5 3/4 of an inch. But I'm going to cut some off here. I know that. So I'm going to see where 20 inches comes to. And I think that'll be good. So I'm just sort of guesstimating here. I'm just trying to decide what I want to save and what I want to just not worry about. So I think I'm just going to cut a straight edge here, about a straight edge. And I'll save that for some slow stitch or something else. That little piece be pretty on a card. Now I'm lining up this, whoops, there we go. I'm lining up this edge. And this line is my 20 inches. You will need an iron and a sewing machine, unless you want to sew it by hand, which could be done as well. Now I'll leave this here. I'm going to measure that because I don't know what this measures. On the narrowest part, it's all about, what is that, 7 inches? 7 inches. Yeah, so get my long ruler. And get my sides straight as possible, and I'm going to trim off the smallest amount. Now I will take this to my iron. Now I'm on an ironing surface, and I have a gauge here, but I don't like to use a gauge. I just eyeball this. It's going to be close enough. Just make it a scant 1/4 of an inch. I have a hot, dry iron. And I'm just going to press that. Let that cool while I do this side. I'm going to just fold it the way it's pressed and hold it up to my stick. And that's pretty darn great. So my stick is just covered, just what I wanted. So I'll take it to my sewing machine, and I'm going to just stitch down this length as close to the folded edge as I can make it. And then once that's done, I'm going to fold it right sides together, match up my ends, and stitch, and I use clips or pins depending on the fabric, and stitch. You can stitch a 1/4 inch. I think that's normally what I would do. The other one looked a little bigger, but the stick's going to fit even if you go 1/2 inch. Well, I figured out that the reason I wasn't sure if this was a 1/2 or a 1/4 inch is because I used the edge of my foot, which is about 3/8 maybe of an inch, and that'll work. So now I have it stitched on all 3 sides, and I'm going to turn it. And I know there's tools for this, but I just pull it through. Okay, so now like I said, a lot of people have different ways of doing this. This is just the way I like to do it, the way I'm used to doing it. So I open it up and I put my seam about in the center. Doesn't have to be exact. You do want to make sure that it's all laying that seam. I can feel that seam facing up here. You want to make sure that you have that going the same direction. When it was flat, before I turned it, I could have pressed it. That might have helped. So that's nice and pressed, and this is the side that's going to go against the back of the quilt. So I'm going to turn it over, decide if there's a way I like it better. This way. It's the back of the quilt, doesn't really matter. I have my trusty clips, and I'm going to give that one more press on the bottom edge. Now I'm going to move this up. You can see there's my crease. I'm going to move it up about 1/4 inch. And I start from the middle, the center of it, of the sleeve. And I'm just going to put a little clip on there. You could use pins if you don't have the clips. Just about 1/4 inch. You just try and make it even all the way across. You can go right down to the edge, the end rather, and put one there, and that'll kind of make the center places easier to do. So it's just rolling that crease up about 1/4 inch. Now because I'm done ironing, I'm going to move this back onto my regular surface. So make sure you're on the top of your quilt. And I did clip this just where my crease was, the original crease. And all I'm going to do, these clips are just loose right now, they're just holding that. But I will use clips. You can pin it along here. I'm not on the binding, I'm just beneath it. So that's where I'm going to stitch it, just beneath the binding. I'm not going through the front fabric, I'm going to catch the back fabric. It's okay to catch a little batting, but I don't want to go to the front. So I'm going to start here and have this lined up. And I pin or clip a lot usually. I just feel more secure that way. But do whatever is comfortable for you. And this can move a little bit, it's not critical. You just want to make sure that the parts to your stick and the sleeve don't show. I have a needle and I'm using single thread. Some people like to double it, I don't. And I made it long thinking I'd get all the way across, but chances are I won't. So I'll have to probably make another one anyway, and if long gets tangled and makes you frustrated, then don't make a long thread. You just have to knot it and change it more. I'm going to zoom in a little so you can see what I'm doing now. I'm going to just start here. I like to hide my knot underneath here in the sleeve, and I may have to get in a thimble because this fabric's a little heavier than others. Let's see, let me get in the center here. So I have my crease just resting underneath where the binding and the quilt back meet. And I'm gonna, because I started over a little so my knot would be hidden, I'm gonna come back to the tip, but I'm gonna grab the backing, just a little of the backing. And these quilts my quilts don't weigh much, but if you've got a quilt that's embellished, then I would really suggest that you double your thread. So I'm just going to do on the quilt, slide my needle across, making sure I'm not on the front. You can usually tell if you have a lot on the needle, you can tell you've probably gone too far. And then I'm going to catch that. This is hard right here because I'm in the thicknesses of that end, the end folding over him there. And it may look a little awkward, but that's probably because I'm standing and I'm in an awkward position because it's really quite fast. So I've grabbed some of that backing and I'm just taking a little bite into the sleeve. Do it in one step. So I'm right where I came up, I'm going down, sliding my needle into the quilt back. You can see if it's shiny that you didn't grab the fabric, and then taking a little bite, all in one step. Just a slip stitch, I guess. I want to make sure I've gotten where it's painted. I want to make sure that I'm catching enough fabric to hold. And I don't know if you can see that. My shiny needle is there, a little teeny shiny bit. That means I grabbed too much. So, and if the thread matches your front, then that helps. I don't always check, I'm just checking because I'm trying to show you and I want to not have it showing on the other side especially. So I will continue on. I think you probably got the gist of how I'm doing this. And see, it's very nice. It's nice and neat. So I'll continue on to the other end, and then I'll show you how we get down to this step. So I've gotten to the end, and I've done a couple stitches around the very top edge of the sleeve and the back. Can't see them on the front, so that's always great. And I'm going to just take a little stitch of the back, and this is where you want to be careful that you didn't pull through, get through to the front. And I'm going under the sleeve, and can you believe that I unthreaded. I did not have to, too far away from my face. This is a small-eyed needle. I did not have to cut another thread, so my thread went the whole length, so that's always great. And there we go. I just take a little stitch. I don't always, but I am going to do that on this one. A little stitch just to get my knot back behind the edge of the quilt better. And I'm going to make a little knot. Then, and this is hard because it's on black, and if I pull it closer you really won't be able to see, I'm attempting to slide my knot under between the backing and the quilt. Oh, it worked. And I kind of do overkill on things, and if this doesn't go through you'll see blue on the back. I can't really see the hole because my face is too far away, but I'm going to hopefully, there. That's fine. And then I'm going to cut it off. And that's the top edge. I don't know if this thread would show on the front, but it looks good. The more quilting you have, sometimes it makes that a little more of a challenge just because of the quilting squishing the pieces together, and then you're more likely to go all the way through at those points. So now I'm getting my needle threaded with another length of thread. So I decided to show you this a different way. And so I've stuck we have the little 1/4 inch pin folded up here, but I stuck my rod, my stick in there in the sleeve, and I've decided I'm pushing it up as I go down, and you can still see my little fold crease line here. I'm pinning this, which is a little tricky because of so much quilting, and I'm not necessarily bringing the pin back up. I'm just putting it in there to hold it for now. But with that rod in there, then I have an idea of all of this will be flat. So I am just gonna take this and pin it along. So even though I switched this by having the rod in here and then pinning it, I will stitch the sleeve on the same way I did when there were just clips across here. So my sleeve is all stitched on, top and the bottom, and I'm really happy about that. The one thing I did that I usually pay attention to and didn't is that I pressed this with the seam going upwards. And actually it doesn't matter. It just, to me, feels like it should be going down. But anyway, I'm going to stitch across here anyway. I won't do that right now, but it's the same thing. I just do a running stitch across the top. You can cut some of the bulk out of here if you wanted to, but I don't bother. I just stitch across, again, making sure I'm not going through to the front. And the reason I do that is so that when the sleeve is slipped in, I won't go under that and in between the back of the quilt. I'll actually be in the sleeve rather, and it doesn't matter that that's sticking up. So I have my stick, which I put a little sandpaper on before. I should have said that when I started. I sanded all the edges just very, very slightly. You could do it with an emery board if it's small. Anyway, I see a little sliver there. You just want to be careful of those. I like to take, if there is a rounded edge, and again, this is a doorstop, so there often is a rounded edge. I like that rounded edge to be toward the front of the quilt. So I'm going to pretend those are already stitched on my edges and stick my quilt rod inside the sleeve with the rounded part is in the front. Fingers crossed everything looks good. I've got a little space on both sides. And that piece is ready for hanging. So I will hang this, but to see how I actually hang them and get it level, be sure, if you're interested in that, to watch the video that I'll link that shows you how to actually hang a quilt when you've made the sleeve and the rod like I do. If you liked this video, I hope you'll give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed, please do, and be sure and tap the bell so you'll get notifications of my most recent videos. Until next time, this has been Ann. Thanks a lot for watching.